Welcome everyone to this final webinar of the Professional Development Program of this year 2020 for Teachers of English. During this year, more than 4,000 teachers have participated of the program. And we have presented wonderful international speakers. And as a Christmas gift, today I have the honor to welcome back Professor Penny Ur, presenting her webinar, Getting Them to Talk in English. As you must feel, I'm so excited to learn what you have to teach, dear Professor Penny Ur. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and we are ready to listen to you.
Okay, hello everyone. It's lovely. You're coming from around. My topic is getting them to talk in English. Can you see my screen all right? Just nod if you can see it, okay?
Yes, yeah. Perfect.
Or write in the chat box. Okay, fine, good. Okay, yes, I can see the chat box and I can see you're saying yes. So getting them to talk in English, and I'm going to discuss various things, but before I do that, I'd really like to hear from you some answers to some questions. I'm going to put a poll up on the screen, and I'd like you to key in your answers. If there are, in one question, there are options where I've said, if none of the, if you want to add something, then write it in the chat box, so you can write an answer also in the chat box. Let's start it, and you just fill in as you go, and I'll stop it after we've got a reasonable majority of people who've answered. So over to you. Can you see that all right? Okay, so go ahead and write in your answers. They all have to do with getting students to speak in class. Ah, right. Okay, now I can see people are writing in. Fine, thank you. Okay, we'll give this a minute. People have answered more. Okay. You can scroll down to see the rest of the questions. Or write in any answers to question 3. Classes is a problem. So yes, absolutely. Yeah, Daniel, a problem I encounter setting up speaking activity, time consuming, students aren't used to them. Interesting that they're not used to doing them. That means that they don't do them very often. And time. Okay, let's look at some preliminary results and see where we are. I'll show you what it says here. You can see the results. Let's look at the first question. When you learned, do you remember your teacher running speaking activities? The majority is yes, occasionally, rather than the others. So it's not something that all teachers do regularly in your experience as students. In your present situation, is students' ability to speak English normally assessed? Yes. The majority, yes, but quite a substantial minority say no. The reason being, of course, that speaking tests are very expensive because you have to do them one-on-one or occasionally in groups, but usually one-to-one, and it's very, very expensive to set up. How often do you do speaking activities with your class? Again, I'm pleased to see that the majority do it more than once a week, but at least as many say they do it once a week or less than once a week. So very mixed responses there. And what do you think are the main problems? Main problems are student reluctance. And this is what I feel as well with my students. They don't want to talk, and one of the results is number 2, which was the next most important one. The students keep reverting to their mother tongue. And all sorts of other points as well, like the textbook doesn't provide things, and ideas which you also have mentioned in the chat box. I haven't got time to go through all the comments in the chat box, but I've noted a couple of things. Now, Carla says something about the issues with teenagers. Teenagers are a particular problem because they're reluctant to open up very often. And Valeria says she uses drama. Yes, great. I'll be talking about that a little bit. And they end up speaking in their mother tongue. Says Rosa, yes, it's so true that mother tongue is very much a problem, that students, because they're shy or reluctant, or they don't want to talk in English, so they go back to their mother tongue. Okay, so let's see how I can relate to these various points. Thank you very much for your participation. So I'm going to, in this talk, I'm going to relate to some of these points. In general, getting our learners to talk in English is a challenge, and I imagine that's why many of you have joined this webinar, simply because it is a challenge for teachers all over the world, including where I live in Israel. Students are reluctant, as you pointed out. Speaking may not be tested in final exams. In many cases it is, but in high stakes exams very often not, simply because it's expensive and time consuming. Textbooks may not give many ideas, or if they do, they may not be ones which you can relate to or you enjoy doing. And it's tricky to administer and control speaking activities, particularly the question of control with teenage classes are sometimes undisciplined and reluctant, and they'll go off task and they'll start speaking their mother tongue, and they'll do other things, and it's a problem altogether. Okay, so what I'm going to look at in this presentation is some possible solutions or possible ways of addressing. I don't, perhaps it's a bit ambitious to say solutions, but ideas that can help. And I'd like to point out at this point that the final presentation will be available to you. I've sent it to Abby and she'll be putting it up on the Uribe site. So you'll be able to see the presentation. You don't need to take notes. And if there's any problems or anything particular thing you want to talk to me about, then I'll be giving you my email at the end of this presentation, and you can write to me personally. It's fine. Okay, so in this session then, I'm going to be talking about the following problems. First of all, creating a speaking-friendly environment, a class where students are likely to be able to feel okay about speaking. Easing in, I'm going to talk about very rudimentary, easy exercises that get students to start speaking in English and feeling comfortable speaking in English without doing sort of fully fledged speaking activities. I'll go on to simple speaking activities, particularly for young learners, but also beginners at any age. More advanced speaking activities. And finally, I'll relate to the problem of doing speaking activities online, which is a challenge many of us have to cope with at the moment. Okay, so creating a speaking friendly environment in principle. So we need to create situations where students, first of all, are aware that it's important. We need to share with our students how important it is, make sure they themselves know how important it is actually to speak and to do speaking activities. And another principle is to make sure that the speaking activity is easy. Within their profession about a topic where they simply don't know the vocabulary, it's really difficult. What I call success orientation. So they know they can succeed in doing whatever the task is, and they know that their speech will be well received. They're not going to be criticized or corrected or made to feel embarrassed or distressed in any way if they speak. And finally, motivation. The activity is interesting, it's fun to do. So let's look at each of these in turn very briefly before I come on to the practical activities. Firstly, the importance of awareness. It's really important to know how to speak. So it's probably worth spending a little time discussing in your mother tongue why speaking is so important, to raise students' awareness of the importance of it, particularly with adults or teenage learners. We talk about being able to speak a language as if this is sort of being able to speak and hear and read and write a language, but we say to speak a language, meaning to know a language. Speaking is absolutely basic, and it's really important for communication. I talked about proficiency level, mainly vocabulary. So we need to make sure the task requires the use of language they know, or the use of global expressions they've learned by heart, and I'll give you some examples later, or even the use of entire spoken text they know by heart, and again, I'll give examples. They know they can succeed, called success orientation, so the task has a goal, which, yes, I can do this, they feel. It's a yes task, it's a I can do this task. And it's not too long, and it's simple for you to explain and for them to understand. You don't need to spend hours and hours explaining how to do it, or have multi stages which take ages. They know their speech will be well received, so we need to build a supportive classroom climate. Now, this is a topic for an entire session. I won't go into that. But the feeling that if the student has to feel that if I say something, nobody's going to laugh at me, nobody's going to criticize me, people are going to accept what I say in a pleasant and friendly way. So that's what a supportive classroom climate is. It's not just the way I accept their utterances, but also the way they accept each other. So nod and smile, that's you. Echoing is a useful technique we use for various reasons, but one of the reasons we echo is to confirm, affirm what the student has said. What if you have said is so good and so important that it's worth my while to repeat it. So echoing has this sort of affirmative function, as well as correcting and the other things we do with echoing. Don't usually correct. There are cases where we might, so I'm not going to say never correct, but not usually. We don't usually correct when they're speaking, because the main point is for them to speak. Interesting. So again, another thing which I could do for an entire session, Abby, maybe I'll take this as one of my topics if I do a masterclass, interest. The activity is interesting and fun to do. A clear, achievable goal that's personalized. The students have an opportunity to express themselves. It's like a game. It's not actually a game, but game-like and game-like challenges. Again, I'll give some examples soon. And visual materials, which occupy the eyes and draw the attention. And the use of what I call language play. Again, I'll give examples like fun ideas or interactions where they say things which are interesting and fun to hear or to think about. Again, I'll give examples. Okay, so let's come into my first category of kinds of activities, and I'm going to start on with what I call easing in, using exercises which look as if they are language exercises, but actually they're going to speak, and because they're using written exercises from the book, they're very easy to cope with, and they know the language and all the other things which I said were important for success orientation. So let's have a look at this sort of very simple kind of matching exercise. So match A and B, you can throw a ball, you can wear a shirt, you can break a glass and so on. So that's just ordinary vocabulary exercise, but we can make it into an oral fluency exercise while still practicing the vocabulary by simply deleting one of the columns. So you can throw, and you invite students to say all the things that they can throw. Okay, they can throw a ball, but they can throw all sorts of other things as well. They can throw an apple, they can throw a book, they can throw whatever they like, and you wear, and they can say all the things they can wear. And you're getting them to speak a lot more while you're still practicing the target verbs. If you want to practice the nouns, you simply do it the other way around. What can you do with these various things? You can in the house, you can build the house and so on. Or a glass, what can you do with a glass? You can drink from a glass, you can hold a glass, you can fill a glass, you can empty a glass. There's no end to it. And the students suggest all sorts of things. And what you find yourself with a situation where the students are speaking a lot more than in the original version of the exercise, as well as practicing the vocabulary. What about this one? Make a true statement about yourself using one of the target words. Again, remember what I said about personalization and vocabulary, but throw a tantrum, yes. Thank you for that contribution from the chat box. An idea with what you can say about with throw. Grammar is a very similar idea, but in this case, it's a gap fill. Well, not exactly a gap fill, a sentence completion with given verbs, and the target is to make sentences using the present perfect. So Lena can't find her key, lose, so they have to say Lena has lost her key, okay? Peter weighed 8 kilos, for now he weighs 60, be on a diet. Peter has been on a diet. Not much a range of possibilities there for speaking, but if you open-end it, you delete the verbs, and instead of the verbs, imagine those verbs in parentheses are deleted. Tell them ignore the verbs in parentheses and tell me what has happened. Okay, so Lena can't find her key. Okay, any ideas about number 2? Peter weighed 80 kilos, now he weighs 60. He has been on a diet. Any other ideas? Write in the chat box about what Peter maybe has done or what has happened to Peter. But I still want to use the present perfect because I'm practicing the present perfect. But what has happened? Any ideas? He has had an operation. He has changed his eating habits. He's been ill. Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much for all those ideas. I can't keep up with them. Yeah, one of my students says he has been in love, I remember. Okay, you're doing it in writing, but you can imagine doing it in speech, and it's very quick and easy. And if you're really focusing on speech, you want them to speak rather than practice the grammar, then you can say you don't have to use the present perfect at all. You can say whatever you like, what has happened or what happened in the past or what is happening, and just set them free to answer all sorts of reasons why these things are happening. Okay, going on then from there, the principle of both the exercises showed you, the matching exercise with the vocabulary and the sentence completion with the grammar. Almost any standard grammar or vocabulary is made into a simple oral interaction exercise by opening it to multiple responses. And the way you do that is you delete part of it. You delete the prescribed choice of answers and say you can answer whatever you like. Delete one of the columns in a matching exercise, or you delete the verb in the word in parenthesis in a sentence completion, or you delete the bank of options in a gap fill. You can see how that would work. There are some advantages to making these exercises open-ended in this way. Very short, fairly structured responses, so they're very easy to answer. They've got the basic structure there, or the basic vocabulary there, based on a familiar format, and opportunity for modeling by the first responders. So what you find when you do this kind of exercise is students who are normally shy and refuse to speak will come in and contribute after there have been a few responses from the stronger students when they see how it works, and all they need to do is change a word or two here and there, and you'll find much more participation by the weaker or the less confident students. It's success oriented. They're likely to succeed because they're very simple responses. And as you saw in your responses in the chat box, I'm just seeing here, he has got divorced, yes. You get humor and things from their own background and world knowledge coming in there. Okay, easing in 2, based on chunks learned by heart. And this, firstly, I want to talk about charts. This is one which I invented, but I'll talk about Carolyn Graham, who's the mother of charts in a moment. So this one goes, hi, Lou, how are you? Hi, Lou, how are you? Hi, Kate, I'm feeling great, and how are you? So it's got a very clear rhythm. It's not a song, but it imitates the rhythm of natural speech and gets them talking. And they're actually learning it off by heart, but they are speaking. And I've heard my students say to her, gosh, I'm speaking English, listen to me. And it's real English. This is a very, very simple one, obviously, for beginners, but you can do slightly more advanced ones later. It can be performed in chorus. Even online, you could do it in chorus. Tell them all to turn on their microphones and do it in chorus. Useful interactive chunks. The chants are based on authentic interactive chunks, which they will use in conversation. They replicate the rhythm of normal speech. That's why I prefer chunks to songs, actually, because they replicate normal speech much more closely. No possibility of making mistakes, so they're not going to feel, oi, I'm going to make a mistake and somebody's going to laugh at me. And when it's done in chorus, so shy students are performing, as it were, under the shelter of the others. So they're not worried about being heard later in pairs or small groups. Okay, I can't follow up this link now, I don't have time, but I do recommend if you download this presentation, that you look at the link here, which takes you to a YouTube by Carolyn Graham, where she shows how she discovered, in fact, the value of chants and how they work. It's a lovely little clip. Okay, dialogues, standard routine. Again, it's learning by heart. What's the time? It says, do you like apples? Yes, I do. Do you like bananas? They're a bit boring, but very basic, but they learn it by heart, and various things you can do with these once they've got it by heart. A chain, so one student asks his neighbor, and the neighbor asks the next neighbor, and the neighbor asks the next neighbor, so it goes round the class in a chain. A time limit, this is quite fun, doing it again, round the class chain. Let's see if you can get around the entire class in 5 minutes, okay? Or let's time you, okay, let's do it again, see if you can break your record and do it more quickly. And then they have to speak fairly fast and promptly, and they have lots of opportunity to actually say the sentences. Accumulating, that's, do you like a banana? Yes, I like a banana. She likes a banana, I like an apple. she likes a banana, she likes an apple, and I like a peach. And they actually accumulate until they can't remember the numbers of things that they've accumulated as they are interacting. Or you can take more dramatic ones, which I quite enjoy, ones which imply some kind of conflict or drama. Come here at once. Who, me? Yes, you, come here at once. What's the matter? And again, performing it. But if you analyze this little dialogue, it's got some very useful interactive chunks, which once they've learned them, they can use in other contexts. Come here at once. What's the matter? Okay, really useful interactive chunks for knowing. Or here's a more one for more advanced or even adult students. Performed by two groups, chorally, pairs privately, volunteer pairs before the class, something you can do in breakout rooms in online, and so on. Advantages, it's fun, it's entertaining, and morale boosting. As I said, hey, I'm communicating fluently in English, a really nice feeling for them, and they're unlikely to make mistakes. I said useful interactive chunks. And they can do them in all sorts of different ways, perform them fast, perform them slow, variation, characterization. They can change the texts of the dialogues, and they can even develop them into an entire sketch or play, particularly with younger learners. I used to do a play at the end of the year, and I met my students many years later. They say they still remember the dialogues that they learned within these plays that they performed. Scaffolded activities is using a familiar structure or pattern they can use as a basis to construct their own variations. And the most obvious one of these is guessing games. Guessing games, all the questions are more or less the same pattern. Okay, it's sort of is it or do you or whatever. Find someone who, again, it's a basic pattern which they simply repeat again and again. And class surveys, if you have a class survey on, say, sleeping habits or television viewing habits, the questions are fairly regular, basic. They're asking them again and again, but with different variations and getting different answers. So again, you've got the scaffolding, and it's easy to do, but it is real communication. Guessing games based on yes/no statements like these, okay? And get them used to using them, and they're fun to do. I said these are game-like activities. For example, what's in my bag for younger learners? What's in the picture? What's my job? Who am I? A celebrity, try to guess who I am. What am I doing based on mime? All these possible ones, which I'm sure you know about. Find someone who. They have a set of questions to ask each other, and they simply mingle in the classroom. Very difficult to do this one online, but in a regular classroom you can do it. Find someone who chews chewing gum. Find someone who's been to New York. Find someone who has a dog. You can make up these yourselves, and it gets them purposefully, but repetitively asking each other things and finding out things, and then summarizing the results in full class. This is a more advanced one, which my advanced students really enjoy doing. They write down a chore I hate doing, my favorite place, something that annoys me, and then they try and find a soulmate. They find someone else who feels the same way, and it's really fun and entertaining, and it also incidentally contributes to a feeling of solidarity and friendship and sharing within the class. So these are the activities for find someone who, for scaffolding. To come on now to simple speaking activities. No preset learnt text or scaffolding. So we're getting, as I go on in this presentation, we're getting more and more difficult, but this is still fairly easy stuff. No preset learnt text or scaffolding, but still based on sentences that are at their level, particularly lexical levels, words they know, at their level or even slightly below. It's fine to do things which are, as it were, too easy from the point of view of language, short. For example, here's one which, again, it's for teenagers and young learners rather than adults. One person stands with her back to the board, and on the board is a list of words, okay, all belonging to the same lexical set. So a list of colors, list of animals, list of sports, list of parts of the body, whatever. And the rest of the class have to bombard them with hints without mentioning the target word to help them to guess. So the person with their back to the board is not actually speaking, but the rest of the class is speaking as fast as they can. You can give them a time challenge. You can put them into two teams. So a representative of one team comes to the board with their back to the board, and the rest of their team tries to get them to guess as fast as possible. And the teacher times them. And then the other class, the other team gets their turn with another set of words and tries to outdo the previous team. So you can do it as a team game, but I found it just as effective as a full class activity, reverse guessing. It's called reverse guessing because you're not asking questions in order to find out something, but you are being told lots of hints and finding out. Okay, for example, here's one list I've used. For example, sports. Okay, you have to guess them, and you can do, of course, when these class are throwing out the hints for the students to guess, the student rather, to guess with their back to the board, then they can, of course, define them in any order they like. I forgot to say that when doing this activity, I found it very useful not to have one student with their back to the board, but two out of the team or two out of the class, because then it lowers the stress for the person standing there. There's two of you to share it and you help each other. So that's just a useful tip if you do what I call reverse guessing. Conjecturing is a sort of elegant word for guessing. And I use it because it's not a guessing game, because there's not one right answer. Conjecturing is, there's no one predetermined right answer. So you give them a challenge and say, okay, guess what the answer is, but any answer could be right. So here's a couple of examples. An easy one. The conjecture is always statements rather than questions. The class may decide later which is the best answer. Here's one I've done lots of times with easy elementary classes or even lower intermediate. I draw something on the board and I ask them to say to me, what do you think this is? Well, what do you think it is? See if someone can write in an egg, okay. Other than an egg, come on, a donut, right, a piece of bread. A stone. It could be a hat from above, right? A potato, rocks. Okay. And they start throwing out all sorts of ideas. You can, if you wish, ask them to speak in full sentences, or you can ask them to just say a single word, depending on the level of the student and how much you want to demand. Or here's a more advanced example. What can you tell about them? And I put them into groups. You can do this in breakout rooms as well. Though you'd have to send them the picture in advance because you can't display a picture at the same time as you're doing breakout rooms, unfortunately. But you give them the picture or ask them to look at a picture in their textbooks and say, okay, tell me her name, how old she is, anything you know about her family, what you think her profession is, what you think her interests are, what her ambitions are, all sorts of questions. And they build up a profile and then share later what they think about this woman. I'll show you where you can find more examples, this sort of thing at the end of the presentation. Picture dictations. I don't know how many of you have done this. Students dictate a picture to the teacher draws, and don't worry if you can't draw. I'm awful at drawing, but the students really enjoy seeing my efforts at drawing whatever they dictate to me, or it can be done in pairs. Students dictate pictures to each other in pairs, or they take turns dictating to their partner what to fill in a joint picture. So you can do it either way. Say things about a picture, one of my favorites here. In groups, students say as many things as they can about a picture in 2 minutes. So you say to them, and this can be done online actually if you have a class which is not more than, say, about 20 students. I'll be talking about online speaking activities at the end, as I said. What can you say about this picture? And they start throwing out anything they can say about the picture. Okay, he's a man, something as simple as he is a man, the bird is flying. Okay, or more advanced, the man is feeding the pigeons. So it can be easy or difficult, and the point is to say as much as you can. If you give them a time limit, as much as you can in 1 minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, or let's see if we can get to 20 utterances. And when we've done it, we do it again, maybe with another picture. And what you can do if you are in full class, and maybe some of the more creative ones of you will think of ways you can do it online. I've only done it in a face-to-face. In a group, students say as many things as they can about a picture in 2 minutes. A secretary notes down a tick for each idea as it's suggested. And then you ask them how many each group has got, how many ticks. They don't write down the full sentence, obviously it would slow down too much. They write a tick. And then you challenge them to do the same with another picture and try and break their original record, which raises motivation, and it's a game-like, and it works really nicely. It's easy and interesting to do because it's very simple language. They have a choice what to say. It's collaborative. We're doing it together and getting a good result together that we can all feel good about. It's like a game. If you try it with students, you'll see that it gives the impression of a game. You've got this sort of feeling of adrenaline going up and pleasant stress that you get when you're doing a game. Let's move on now to more advanced speaking activities, which demand original expression without models. So we're taking away the scaffolding and asking students who have a good demand of the language to stretch themselves and express themselves in English using more advanced tasks. But still, I still feel strongly that it's much better for the more advanced activities, as it was in the previous ones, to have speaking tasks based on a clear goal. You have to achieve this, you have to find out this, you have to list this, draw this, do as much as you can in the time, a clear goal, rather than, here's an interesting topic, discuss it. Just discuss a topic doesn't work nearly so well for most classes as does a task which has achieved this. I'll give some examples. I've already given some, I'll give some more in there. For example, brainstorming. Okay, the task here is to find as many answers as you can. So how many uses can you find for a common object? A tin can, a pencil, okay, and anything which is around, and it really helps if they actually have the thing in front of them. So if you're doing a pencil, ask them actually to hold a pencil and think about what they could do with it. How many uses can you find for it? Can be done in groups and then share in the full class, or in a full class, even online. How many associations can you find between two objects, even if they're quite different objects, like a pencil and a plate of spaghetti? What's the link between them? Can you find a link? And it's really quite difficult, quite challenging, but they can find associations, or easier things which are similar kinds of things, like can you find similarities between a car and a train, or things which come from the same area. So associations. How many things can you find in common with your partner, or if you're in threes? You can do this in breakout rooms. Find as many things as you can in common, and then come back and share with us. It's also a lovely icebreaker for students who don't yet know each other very well. And it leads to a sense of, again, solidarity, what we're sharing, in what ways are we together. The story behind the picture, an action picture or a still from a movie is really nice and really easy to download from the internet. What's the story behind the picture? What's just happened? What's going to happen? What are the characters saying? That sort of thing. Those were all brainstorming ideas, and here we come on to a different kind of task, which is a consensus. So the group has to agree on something and discuss in order to agree. So agreeing or disagreeing with a statement or set of controversial statements, or how would you alter the statement so that everybody can agree with it? A dilemma. What would you do in this particular dilemma? One of the earliest ideas I had for which started me writing my own book on this, was the idea of letters to the agony column of a magazine. So the people write in and say, I have this terrible problem, can you help me? And the expert writes an answer. And one of the earliest things I did was give my students one of these letters, which I'd made up, actually a fictional letter, and ask them to get into groups and design the letter that they would write in answer to this person with the problem. And it got them speaking amazingly. So how would you solve this problem? And how would you define, in the form of a letter in this case, but it could be a single sentence, how the dilemma should be solved? Candidates, and this is a mixed activity, mixed skills activity, because they actually have to see the text before them. So they did it online, they'd need to have the text sent to them or available to them in a book before they start. The group decides who is most suitable to get a prize or to enter a course or whatever. Again, I'll give you some sources where you can find this kind of task. Or priorities. The group is given a list and decides what is the most important, or what is the most, what is the easiest, or what is the most dangerous. It depends what the list is. But if it's most important, for example, one which always works well with an advanced class is qualities of a teacher. So you brainstorm 10 qualities of a teacher and then ask the group to decide, to come to a consensus on which are the most important, in what order of priority they would put them. Assembling information, I've talked about brainstorming, I've talked about consensus. The third one here is assembling information, getting together to contribute information to some kind of whole project. So for example, creating and administering a survey, for example, television viewing habits. So the actual creation of the survey involves speaking in English. One person has to write things down, but the rest of them are speaking. Planning an event, a party or a ceremony or an outing of some kind, or travel. Setting up an ideal school. What would my ideal school look like? They're all experts on this. So they can, in groups, work out what their ideal school would be like and then share it with everyone. Designing a profile of an ideal teacher, ideal student, ideal parent. Again, something which they're experts on and can easily do, though it does demand fairly advanced language. The last set of advanced speaking activities which our students may need to do, particularly a class of academics, they may need to do presentations, either singly or in pairs. At a lower level, simply a story. I'm not going to read out everything, but the story can be based on any of these. Okay, they can present to the class a story. Instructions. Or very often in academic or business classes, information, a research-based project, or something which they want to convey information about to the audience. Presentations, of course, are prepared in advance and only given in class after they've been prepared. You wouldn't just come into class and say, okay, give me, do a presentation on a story without preparation. So essentially, it's a prepared presentation, very often using PowerPoint. Various points I just want to make about presentations. Is it okay, teachers sometimes, is it okay to have them reading aloud? And I would say no. I wouldn't want them to read aloud. On the whole, what I want them to do is say their own speech. However, learning by heart, I think it is okay, or learning by heart, at least some of it, can be helpful. And if they learn by heart and then present, they're going to remember the text they learn by heart, and it's going to be really helpful to them, as well as enabling them to speak fluently. So you might say, maybe learn bits of it by heart. Learning by heart, the whole thing is too much, but learn perhaps your opening sentence and your ending sentence learn by heart, and then bits of it possibly learning by heart from the middle as well. Can be done in pairs, which lessens the stress. It's easier to do a presentation if you're sharing it, if you're doing some of it, your partner's doing some of it. Use of PowerPoint, very, very helpful. I mean, doing this presentation now, I'm relying on my PowerPoint to help me remember what I wanted to say. And it's a real support to help the students remember what they want to say. Recording. It's a really useful technique which I learned very recently from a colleague of mine working in a university, who gets her students to record the presentation, then send her the recording. There's lots of tools online you can use to do this, or you can do it on your cell phone. It's less stressful to the students, and enables the teacher, makes it much easier to assess as well. So that's a very useful tool, recording presentations and sending them to you to assess, and presenting to the class, of course, with the permission of the person who recorded them. My final section, just the last few minutes, I want to talk about doing speaking activities online. Really, really problematic. And I haven't had that much experience doing it myself, but I've talked to people who have, and I'm just going to share a few tips, and I hope you'll also use the chat box to share your own, those of you who've got more experience perhaps than I have on this. So tip number one, make sure cameras are open. It's much easier to speak to each other if you can see each other. And here you have a problem with teenagers who very often don't like to open their cameras. They like to stay in the background and not be seen. It's also simply much easier to understand what someone is saying if you can see their faces, see the way their lips are moving. So it helps understand what people are saying. Really important to have cameras on. Just a tip which you might want to use. One of my colleagues suggested it to me, and quite a lot of people here in Israel use it, is that particularly for teenagers, people who are reluctant to open their cameras, they say, your attendance in the class depends on my being able to see you. So if you don't open your camera, you're not there as far as I'm concerned. And I write you as having attended this session only if you have your camera open. So I don't know how well that would work in your culture. Here it works well. Tip 2, make sure microphones are on, so you can speak without worrying if they can be heard or not. Okay, if you have an undisciplined, noisy class, there's a problem of noise, with talking a lot. But with a reasonably disciplined class, and one which is not more than 20 or so students, give or take, it makes it much easier for them to speak readily without worrying if they can be heard or not. Turn on your microphone. You know, we keep reminding, turn on your microphone, I can't hear you, and they forget. If there's background news, ask the students to deal with it rather than muting them. Would it be acceptable to indicate times when cameras must be on? Yes, that could be that's a good idea. Or develop show and tell scavenger hunt. Yes, scavenger hunts are lovely. I can't go into that, but and so maybe you can tell people how to do that. If students speak at the same time, it doesn't matter too much. I mean, if they all speak at the same time, yes. But if 2 or 3 students speak at the same time, you can just say, Camilla, can you wait a minute? And Maria goes first, and then Camilla, and then Pedro. It doesn't matter too much if they're speaking. On the contrary, if they're speaking, even if you can't hear exactly what they're saying, they are speaking, and this is what we want them to do. So I would not worry if you get a little bit of parallel blurred speaking there. Tip number 3, which I found useful, use physical hand raising like this, okay, to the camera when they want to speak, rather than using the icon. It's more natural, it's easily seen, and they tend to forget to turn off the hand raise icon once they've lifted it, and a very useful thing to do. Tip 4, allow free contributions. In other words, don't raise your hand. Just when you want to say something, say it. In a reasonably well-disciplined class of fewer than 20 students, it works well, and it gets a lot more talking than if you have to wait, raise your hand, and nominate. Okay, I can see there's a lot of reactions coming here. I don't have time to respond to them, but Abby, if there's interesting questions coming up here, you'll tell me in a moment. Let students suggest oral responses without raising their hands, and you respond as fast as you can. Some may need to repeat. Great. Repeating is good. They're talking more. And finally, tip 5, use breakout rooms. Time limited. Okay, you have 5 minutes to do a task in your breakout rooms, and then come back and tell me. There's a problem of going into mother tongue here, which is why it's really important to have short, easy tasks. I didn't give an example here, but you can go back and use the tasks which I suggested earlier. The importance of emphasize the importance of keeping to English and visit them. In Zoom, you can go and visit them as it's going on. And I found that it works well using breakout rooms. And of course, as soon as you use breakout rooms and they're only in groups of 2 or 3, for example, the task of finding things in common, they are speaking much, much more than they could in the full class forum. If, I said before, your problem with breakout rooms is you can't display things at the same time, so you'd need to send these in advance if the breakout rooms task is based on visuals or texts. And keep the instructions in the chat box so that if they forget what they have to do, they can always look in the chat box. You can do that in breakout rooms and check back. Okay, I promised you sources for more ideas. Most of the ideas I've used in this session are from my own book, Discussions and More, but some of them were also taken from Friederike Klippel's book, which is a classic and I really recommend, particularly for more advanced students, whereas mine includes more for, includes both advanced and elementary, but quite a lot for elementary as well. I also promised you that I would show you my email, and here it is, if you wish to write and ask questions or make comments on anything I've said. Okay, 5 minutes for questions. Abby, over to you.
Actually, we have just one question, and it is related to the fact that students don't want to open cameras. So if you have more ideas to encourage students to open their cameras.
I think I gave one tip, okay, about making making attendance compulsory. The other one is just to try and persuade them. There may be cases where you just have to accept that a particular student really feels distressed if they're opening their camera, and let it go, let them not open, but do everything you can to encourage them to open their cameras, explaining why it is important. I'm afraid I don't have any further tips. Maybe one of you have some tips here. Yeah.
We are reading
questions.
We are reading a lot of tips here for encouraging students to turn cameras on. So great. Thank you for sharing, everyone. And what would you suggest?
Too fast, isn't it?
Yes. What would you suggest to those teachers who say their students do not have enough vocabulary to speak? By Miss Claudia Bonich.
That's what I was relating to in the first session of this first part of this talk. The activities based on grammar and vocabulary exercises, where the vocabulary is ready-made for them there. And the simple activities, the learning by heart one, the ones based on learning by heart or learning by heart partly, address this problem, because it's no problem with vocabulary if you've learned the text by heart or learned some of it by heart, and are just using, and all you have to do is add an extra word of your own or 2 words of your own. But the main point is, as I said very early on in this talk, to make the task one which you know that your students have enough vocabulary to do. And I've given several examples there.
Thanks. By Miss Fabiola Montoni, which of your books do you recommend for teachers training college?
I've got a book called A Course in English Language Teaching, which is in fact a course you can use selectively, probably because it's too long, but for a teacher training college. So have a look at that. A Course in English Language Teaching, published by Cambridge University Press. But for speaking particularly, as I said, it's Discussions and More, which is also published by Cambridge.
Thank you. By Miss Constanza Castro, I would like to ask, how do you engage students with a vulnerable context? I had this issue last year. Students were a little bit disrespectful, and even though activities were catchy, they didn't want to participate in speaking activities.
Yeah, all I can do here is acknowledge that this is a serious problem with a lot of classes and a lot of parts of the world, that students don't want to cooperate, and they can be disrespectful. The answer that I found in my class, because I'm very bad at discipline, I'm not a particularly dominant personality or charismatic personality, and the way I kept my students on task was by giving them activities that they enjoyed doing, making sure that they were doable, they were perhaps a little bit easy for them, but fun to do, so they would enjoy doing them, they would want to do them, and therefore the discipline problems get very, very much less. They don't entirely disappear, but they get much less. If they're asked to do something which doesn't interest them, or which is too difficult, they become much more stroppy and difficult to control. So that's the way I partially solved it. Not completely, I admit, but I think you need to remember that even if sometimes they are off task, sometimes they are a bit disrespectful, look back at the lesson and see, well, how much did they actually talk in English? And you very often find, if you look at it objectively, that in spite of the fact that you were distracted by undisciplined behavior, they did in fact talk quite a lot of English. So you can feel good about that, even though they may not have been very nice to you. So just keep a sense of proportion and hold on to it. But I just want you to know that a lot of teachers share this problem all over the world. You're not alone. Share with colleagues and get advice from colleagues.
No, you're right. Thank you. By Miss Deborah Nakamuli, how much time, in your opinion, should we devote to speaking every week?
How much time every week? It depends to a large extent what the goal of your course is, okay? And how important, very often, how important the speaking component is in the final exam they're going to be doing at the end of it. So that'll give you more or less the proportion. If the final exam is going to take 20% of the marks, then you need to be spending 20% of your time at least doing speaking activities. If you don't have that end of course exam to look at, then I would say I would want to do speaking activity at least once a week for 10-15 minutes. But remember that for a lot of the activities that you're doing for other things, for example, as I gave grammar exercises, you are also doing speaking. So if you can integrate speaking into your reading activities, for example, you've read a poem or something and then discussing it, then that's also a good source of speaking and can raise the amount of time you use.
Thank you, Professor Penny Ur. I have the last question, but I think that I have the answer. Are we having the opportunity to see her again in 2021? Yes.
Yes.
She's going to be part of this team, so we are really, really honored for that. And she's going to be part of the diploma training program for teachers of English, if you would like to join that program. And of course, she's going to be part of the seminars that we are going to have free for all the teachers. This is the idea. So we are really happy because she's going to be part of the team. Thank you so much.
Yay!
So,
Thank you.
Well, a final message from you, Miss Penny.
Someone asked where they can see the a list of books I've read, books I've written. I've read a lot of books as well. Books I've written. Just put my name into Google and you'll find a list there under my name somewhere. Okay. Or Cambridge University Press. You can go into the Cambridge University Press website because all my books were published by Cambridge. Thank you. I just also want to say thank you very much for your responses and suggestions and questions and compliments. Thank you. And looking forward to seeing you all again at future events.
Thank you very much, Professor Penny Ur.